Earlier this month, U.S. President Donald Trump followed through on something he had long threatened, pulling out of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA.
The U.S. recently pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. The Iran nuclear deal was made after years of tension over Iran trying to make nuclear weapons.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
What is the Iran deal? In November of 2013, the UN Security Council's 5 permanent members, as well as Iran, agreed on a deal for Iran to slow down their nuclear program. Iran said that its nuclear program posed no threat, but many nations did not believe this.
The remaining countries in the deal, the UK, France, Russia, Germany, China, and Iran, have pledged to stick to the agreement despite the U.S. withdrawal.
How does this decision affect Iran?
Well, I mean, the immediate effect on ending the deal is that the United States is no longer a party to the deal. So the deal, from my understanding, was a deal that was struck by multiple nations. And so now the United States pulls out of the deal and they are free to implement any type of economic sanctions that they choose with regard to not only Iran, but with regard to other countries as well that do business with Iran. And one of those countries specifically is Russia. So because the United States pulls out of it, they're signaling to Iran and the other countries that they had worked with to actually create the deal that they're no longer party to it and they're no longer bound by the terms of the deal.
Yeah.
In the agreement, Iran gave up 98% of its uranium stockpile until 2031. In exchange, Europe will remove their energy and banking sanctions. The United States will remove their sanctions with companies who do business with Iran, and all United Nations resolutions sanctioning Iran will be annulled.
Well, why did Obama put this deal in place in the first place?
The deal was put in place because there was a feeling that Iran was working towards a nuclear weapon anyway. And if there wasn't some type of binding agreement with the country itself, that they would continue to work for it. So the general feeling was that, not having a deal in place was not an option because they were working towards gaining access to nuclear weapons in the first place. And so the Obama administration felt that they should be proactive in trying to negotiate with the country of Iran to slow the tide or stem the tide of them acquiring it. Because if they didn't do that, they would be, or at least have the ability to acquire it sooner, rather than for us to kind of delay it. I mean, the sanctions themselves call for inspectors to go into the country to monitor their program. Iran was saying that they were using nuclear, the nuclear research to create energy instead of actually creating a nuclear weapon. So I think on the part of the Obama administration, they felt it was more in our control to monitor their program if we actually struck a deal with them instead of not having a deal in place, regardless.
The reasoning behind why the Trump administration decided to back out of the agreement is that the Trump administration believes that the deal doesn't address the full range of threats posed by Iran. Trump and the Middle Eastern allies are betting they can cut Iran's economic lifeline and thus break the regime, and this could be dangerous if he isn't correct.
Why do you think Trump ended the deal?
I think there's a lot of pressure from Republicans to, basically eliminate a deal that they felt did not go far enough. That's the general feeling amongst conservatives. So, whether President Trump himself believes that the deal was inadequate, the people that generally support him, right, you can call it his base, you can call it the Republican leadership, have signaled to him that the deal was inadequate and that there needed to be tougher sanctions placed on the country of Iran. I mean, regardless of the nuclear weapons, the other goal for the United States with regard to that country is regime change. I mean, they want to basically eliminate the leadership at the top. Iran operates by Sharia law. They're really being controlled by religious clerics instead of the president of Iran. conservatives are more interested in taking a hardline approach with that country.
In response to the U.S. withdrawing from the deal, the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani replied to it saying, "We are not worried about America's cruel decisions. We are prepared for all scenarios and no change will occur in our lives next week." This would suggest that the President of Iran thinks the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action can't continue without the United States' involvement. He went on to say, "If we can get what we want from the deal without America, then Iran will continue to remain committed to the deal. America backing out of the deal could theoretically not affect the deal."
What do you think our allies think of breaking the deal?
I think they're frustrated in the fact that we've worked throughout the Obama administration for 8 years to eventually to come to some sort of agreement. The disappointment, I guess, for the United States is that we lose a little bit of trust and credibility, right? I mean, we've worked with these other countries, we created the deal, now the new administration comes in and they're pulling out of this deal. Long-term damage is in the form of whether countries, including Iran, including North Korea, can actually strike a deal with the United States that they feel like the United States actually is going to uphold. That's the criticism of the Trump administration pulling out is that, as a country, we struck the deal. Now, as a country, we're pulling out of this deal. We're not holding up our promises.
The reactions from the other countries which are a part of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the JCPOA, vary. Backing out of this agreement may not be beneficial to the United States' relationships with their allies. Being taken out of the conjoint group could potentially isolate the U.S. It could also undermine U.S.'s leadership abroad. This breaks relationships that are essential for the United States' success. Leaders from U.S. allies, including Britain, France, and Germany, as well as many other nations, have been strongly urging Trump to honor the agreement to no avail. This shows that it matters to the countries that remain in the deal whether the U.S. is a part of it or not.
Why is Iran's nuclear program such a threat?
I think the United States generally views Iran's leadership, right, their political leadership as, I hate to use the word unstable because that's not the correct answer, but that unpredictable, that they support terrorist organizations, and that eventually that technology can be provided to these organizations that the United States has very little control over. The Middle East in and of itself is a region of conflict, and the United States generally feels that Iran is a rogue nation that supports terrorism and will continue to support terrorism if they were able to have a nuclear weapon.
A nuclear-armed Iran would embolden Iran's aggressive foreign policy, resulting in greater confrontations with the international community. Iran already has a conventional weapons capability to hit U.S. and allied troops stationed in the Middle East and parts of Europe. If Tehran were allowed to develop nuclear weapons, this threat would increase dramatically. In addition, Iran is one of the world's leading state sponsors of terrorism. Another risk is that Iran could potentially share its nuclear technology and know-how with extremist groups hostile toward the United States and the West. While Iranian missiles can't yet reach America, Iran having a nuclear weapons capability can potentially directly threaten the United States and its inhabitants.
What do you think would happen if the deal was officially over? What would the consequences be?
Well, as I said before, I think the bigger consequences for Iran is that the United States might move to implement sanctions against them. But there's economic consequences, with regard to these relationships. There's political consequences. I think the political consequences are damaging for the United States in regards to the other countries that they formed the treaty with. I think as far as the economic consequences, there's no really economic consequences for the United States in and of itself, but there's definitely economic consequences for Iran. I mean, there was a promise to provide them money for development, to ease some of the sanctions that had already been in place prior to striking the deal. The other, I guess, concern would be the economic relationships that we not just have with Iran, but we have with these other countries that might, like I said, might be might be less willing to negotiate with us, not just on nuclear weapons, but on tariffs. Right? There's a huge talk about tariffs and trade. That countries would be less reluctant to strike a deal with the United States because of them pulling out.
How does stopping that deal affect the citizens, like the people of Iran?
I think that there's just, they have state-run media, right? And the presentation of the news story to the citizens of Iran generally demonstrate that they can't trust the United States. That is what is being, that's the message that's being delivered to the citizens of Iran. It's hard to know how they feel, right, about the citizens themselves, but the leadership of our country in the form of the president is reflective of, right, the citizens that actually live in the country. So if they have a negative feeling about our president, there's a transfer of a negative feeling towards the people in general, and that's difficult to overcome.
The U.S. has benefited from the deal because this deal has stretched the time needed to produce a nuclear weapon from 3 to at least 12 months and established the strongest inspection system ever negotiated. This is beneficial to the U.S. since these weapons could be used against the United States and their allies.
How does the Iran deal benefit the U.S.?
Well, I think stability is the biggest benefit, knowing, right, that the United States had some level of control over Iran's nuclear program, along with the help of our allies, right, that constructed the deal. That's the benefit, right? That maybe it'll take them 15 years to develop a nuclear weapon instead of the few years that they were predicting. Maybe they won't develop a nuclear weapon at all, right? And that they'll use it for energy purposes. But that the United States at least had some level of control of oversight over the program itself. That was the biggest benefit.
In conclusion, we don't have a great idea of what is going to happen after the United States pulls out of the Iran deal. According to the Iranian president, America not being involved anymore should not affect the deal since the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China are still in the deal. Pulling out of this deal could definitely have some backlash against America with our allies or with Iran themselves. But was it the right choice? I guess we will find out.